Thank you all very, very much. Chris, thank you for that very, very generous introduction. Thank you for that very warm reception. Before we even get started, let's give Chris and the leadership of NRA's Institute for Legislative Action another great round of applause for all the great work they do for us every day. You know, Chris and I first met when I was elected to Congress back in 2004. I've gotten to know him personally. I consider him a friend. I've gotten to know his work. I can tell all of you, this organization is blessed to be well represented by Chris Cox and the rest of the NRA team in Washington, D.C. They do a great job making your voice and my voice heard in the halls of Congress on the Second Amendment. I'm proud of them. Aren't you for fighting for us? Now, just a few minutes ago, I enjoyed listening to my good friend Phil Bryant, the governor of Mississippi, speak. The thing I like about listening to Phil speak, he is the only governor I hear speak who's got absolutely no accent at all. I think the two of us talk normal, and the rest of you guys have funny accents, by the way. Phil is a good man. He's a great governor. We work together on a lot of policy. We get along great. The only time we disagree is when LSU plays one of those football teams from Mississippi. We stay mad at each other for about a week. You've got to have your priorities, after all. Now, I'm here to talk about American values. And I need to tell you, American values for me, they start with my parents. You see, my parents, like so many of you, they have lived the American dream. My dad is one of 9 children, the first and the only one to get past the 5th grade. Literally grew up in a house without running water, without electricity. I know because I heard these stories every single day of my life. Well, you know, I also remember something my dad would tell my brother and me. He'd say, sons, I'm not going to be leaving you a famous last name or an inheritance. But I want to teach you one thing. I want to make sure that every single day you get up and you give thanks to God Almighty that you are blessed to be born in the greatest and most free country in the history of the entire world, these United States of America. You know, I'll be honest, I didn't always understand what my dad was trying to teach us when we were young boys. Mark Twain said, the older you get, the smarter your parents become. He's exactly right. I don't know about you, I found myself sounding more and more like my dad and speaking the things he spoke to me as I try to raise my 3 young children with my wife. I'm here to tell you, as we try to teach them about those same values, our freedom is under attack today. We must all enlist in the fight to protect it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, you've probably heard from a lot of people today asking you to take action in this year's election. That's not what I'm going to ask you to do. You're not going to get off that easy with me. And by the way, I'm not going to let myself off the hook that easily either. The fight in which we are now engaged is going to rage on long after the coming election, long after even the next presidential election. This fight may endure as long as we live. Our opponents in this fight are prepared for a long conflict. They're not merely content to run a few candidates, spend a few bucks, and try to win a few elections. Let's be honest. They're not going to be satisfied until they have fundamentally altered the ideological foundation of our country. These forces don't believe in individual freedom. Our opponents don't believe that liberty lifts everyone. They don't accept the premise that our rights are given by God and that no government can or should ever take them away. Our opponents believe that individual Americans are subordinate to the state, subjects of the elite, dependent, not independent. Our opponents believe morality is situational. Our opponents believe that wrong can be relabeled right. They believe all of us are dumb rubes or are dumber still because we cling bitterly to our guns and to our religion. We cannot let them win. We cannot let them change who America is. And by the way, when it comes to the state of Louisiana, we are proud to be clinging to our guns and religion, and we're not bitter at all about it. Let me tell you that. We must not let our opponents redefine what it means to be an American, what it means to trust in the decision-making of individuals. If you want to see their vision for America, just have a conversation with Michael Bloomberg or Eric Holder, if you could stomach that is. Let's be honest, they think government should pick your soft drink, your snack food, your vices, your home security system, your health insurance, your electricity source, and your children's school as well. They think we're too dumb to order pizza, or they think we're too dangerous to protect our land. They take perhaps the most pessimistic view of Americans we've ever seen from national leaders in our history. If you listen to them, you get the feeling they're surprised we could tie our own shoelaces without government intervention. I'm sure that they think that's why I wear cowboy boots, by the way. But if this were just the problem of one big city mayor or one liberal president and his attorney general, we could solve it with just a few elections. The reality is it's bigger than that. And by the way, the members of the NRA have done a great job defeating these guys in elections. Last year, absolutely, let's give them a round of applause. Last year in Virginia, Michael Bloomberg's candidates lost to the NRA 65 out of 67 times. The only problem I've got with that is that it wasn't 67 out of 67 times. We'll take 65. But look, if this were only about a few elections, we know what the results would be. But it's not just about a few elections. Let's be honest, there's a larger movement behind these few liberals, and it's supported by some of the most powerful media and entertainment forces in our country. They've got private chefs, but they want to censor your grocery list. They get to see the plastic surgeons of their choice. They want government to pick your cardiologist. They live behind gates and bodyguards, but they would leave you defenseless. They use the heavy hand of the IRS to punish their critics, and then they have the audacity to say that we're the ones who are paranoid. And by the way, I just want to let you in on a little secret. I'm probably going to be audited after saying that. You're probably going to be audited after being at this convention. But it doesn't matter how many of us they harass or they audit, no matter how many of us they choose to annoy, no matter how many of us they attack in elections. We cannot let them win. We cannot let them redefine what it means to be the United States of America. Now, these folks on the left, they are audacious, but I'll share a secret with you. They're also gutless. They refuse to admit their real agenda. The truth is that Michael Bloomberg, Eric Holder, so many of President Obama's wealthiest liberal backers in Hollywood do not, in fact, believe in the Second Amendment at all. You can tell it every time that Joe Biden, every time that Hillary Clinton talk about, quote, how hunting is a part of our heritage. You know, they never talk about the other reasons our founders wanted to protect gun ownership. They think the Second Amendment is a phrase from a speechwriter. We think the Second Amendment is a right created and endowed to us by our Creator, God Almighty. If they had their way, they'd simply cut and paste the Constitution and just get rid of the Second Amendment entirely. Can you imagine what they would replace it with? They'd probably say something like this. This is what they really mean when they say hunting is a part of our heritage. You have a right to look at Polaroid pictures of your grandfather hunting back in 1959 so we can all celebrate your heritage together. That's their idea of the Second Amendment. Now look, there are a lot of legitimate disagreements of opinion over policy in our country. And we can have a respectful disagreement over many of those issues. On many of them, we can simply agree to disagree. But the widening gulf on the fundamental question of liberty is much, much greater than that. And let's be simple, and let's be honest, and let's be loud, and let's be clear. We cannot merely agree to disagree on the primacy of individual freedom when it comes to America. On this question, we must stand, we must fight, and we must win this fight. The moment we compromise on individual freedom, enshrined in the Bill of Rights, enunciated in the Declaration of Independence, and bestowed on us by God Almighty, the moment we compromise that, we will have given away our nation's soul. For we are not a nation that emerged from a single tribe or ethnic group. We're not a nation glued together by an ancient confederation. We're a nation created and united and built and rebuilt by a common set of beliefs, values, and principles. The day we give up on these principles is the day we cease to exist as the country we love. My parents came to this country because America at that time represented the place where freedom rings. Your parents, maybe it was your grandparents, maybe it was your great-grandparents, came to this country for the exact same reason. If we give up on liberty and individual freedom, we give up on America. The stakes are nothing less than our identity as a nation, our reason for being, our hope for the future. We must never give that up. We must never give in. We must never compromise our freedom. We must win this fight. You know, in my first year in Congress, tragedy struck Louisiana. You remember it as Hurricane Katrina. It was devastating to our state, to our families, and to our friends. But the tragedy didn't end when the winds and the rains died down. In the wake of that storm, the government went door to door in New Orleans, confiscating the home defense firearms owned by law-abiding citizens. Imagine that. Even while the thugs were roaming the street, looting and robbing, committing crime after crime, the authorities sworn to uphold the Constitution instead violated the Constitution. I'd only been in Congress for a few months, and I decided we must never let that happen again. Working with a great team at the NRA, we want a strong bipartisan majority to change the law to make sure that that never happens to any American in any natural disaster ever again, anywhere in these United States of America. As governor, we have done more to strengthen the Second Amendment than any other state, and I'm proud of that today. In Louisiana, we don't take our freedoms for granted. We stand and fight every single day. But we also know this. There are forces in this nation that don't fundamentally agree with the premise of liberty that made this country great. We are standing and fighting them every step of the way. That is who we are in Louisiana. It is who you are as fellow members of the NRA. And I'll close with these final two observations. The same liberal extremists that want to come take our guns are the same forces that want to take away our religious liberty, are the same forces that don't think we're smart enough to pick our own health insurance products, are the same forces that don't think we're smart enough to decide what sodas we want to drink or what foods we want to eat. But we've got a message for them. America's greatest days are not behind us, they're ahead of us. We've got a message for them. The Founding Fathers were right when they decided the genius of America wasn't in the strength and power of our federal government. It was in the freedoms of our individual, everyday people living their lives across this great country. We've got a message for them. Michael Bloomberg might have $50 million. I'd rather have the tens of millions of law-abiding, freedom-loving American citizens all across this country who are ready to stand up and say enough is enough. We're ready to stand. We're ready to fight. We're ready to reclaim our freedoms for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. Like you and my brother and me, we have all inherited from our parents and grandparents the privilege, the blessings to be born and raised in the greatest, freest country in the history of the world. We'll leave nothing less for our children and grandchildren. We must fight, we must stand, we will win. Thank you for your vigilance. Thank you for being great and proud supporters of the NRA. May God continue to bless the NRA. May God continue to bless you. May God continue to bless these United States of America, the greatest country in the history of the world. Thank you very much for fighting for freedom. God bless you all.